Namaste and good morning. Let's start the class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhava Swaha, Tat Savitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, मृत्युर्मा अमृतम गम्य ओम सहना भवतु सहना भुनक्तु सवीर्यं कर्वावहि तेजस्वी नावधीतमस्तु मा विद्वेषावहि ओम शांति 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 ओम. Prashnopanishad, that's what we are studying these days in this class. And Prashn means the questions. And this particular Upanishad is based upon the 6 questions asked by these 6 young students. And we are on the 3rd chapter, and that's where the 3rd question was asked. And let's look at, and this question was about the prans, if we remember. Okay. So towards the end of this, so in all these chapters, the first verse is the question, and the rest of the verses in the same chapter are the answers. Okay, if you want to study on your own also, that's how it's written. So let's look at verse number 10 in chapter 3. Yachitaha ten eshaha pranam ayati pranaha tejasa yuktaha saha atmanaha yatha sankalpitam lokam nayati. Yachita, whatever his thoughts, ten eshaha, esha means this means this man, this person. Ten means with that. That means with that thought. Pranam, the chief prana. Prana. Ayati comes. Pranaha, the prana. Tejasaha, with the fire. Over here, the fire means the udan. That's what we learned in the previous verse. Yuktaha, united, being united. Saha means with, Atmana, the Atma. Yatha sankalpitam, as desired. Lokam means the world. Nayati means leads on. Whatever be his thoughts, accordingly he attains the pran. And the pran united with udan, together with the jivatma, is led on to the world thought of. We saw in the last verse that the mind withdrawing the senses into itself is guided by the udan pran to its next field of activity, which is called a lok. So certainly a doubt would come as to who determines the next field. So he is telling us the departing thoughts, yatha sankalpitam, the departing thoughts on the deathbed determine the future field for the ego center to function. Okay? The same thing Lord Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajate ante kalevram tam tam avyati kontaye sada tad bhav bhavita. This was in chapter 8, verse number 6. Lord Krishna said, it is endorsed that the last thoughts of a dying person determine his future incarnation. So last thoughts. This is like an eternal law which is foolproof. And the devata in charge of its execution beyond all temptations. You really cannot say that I am going to live a materialistic life and at the end of this life, I'll think about God and reach God. That's not how it functions. Okay? It's like a resultant of the whole life comes in front of us at the time of the death. So the individual's last thoughts can only be determined by the resultant or the balance sheet of the entire thought life. The person has been thinking good, thinking noble, thinking pious, the last thought will be like that too. But on the other hand, if we dedicate all our life to earning, procuring, eating, breeding, certainly our parting thoughts can never be about the greater spiritual life or moving towards a higher or a nobler evolution. They can be only about the food and the places and the people. And he says, we'll come back to that alone. So the idea of the last thought he's discussing over here. So last thought determines and declares the exact life and destiny the ego center is to live out in its next incarnation. And lok, what does it mean, lok? Philosophically, lok means a field of experience. That's a lok. It could be the world of animals, in the world of the plants, in the world of a super sensuous enjoyment, in the world of the heaven. They are all loks. So it could be anywhere. So it's like a new world where we'll take a body. Okay. So whatever be his thoughts, so it all determines on the thoughts. Accordingly, he attains the pran. That means that pran, which is forcing the jivatma, united with udan, together with jivatma, is led into the world thought of. Okay. Now let's look at number 11. Yam evam vidvan pranam ved nahasya prajaha hiyante amrito bhavati tadesh shalokaha. Yam means, or ya means who. Evam means as such. Vidwan, the learned, the wise. Pranam, the prana. Ved, knows. Naha, never. Praja, progeny. Asya, his. Hiyante, perishes. Amritaha, immortal. Bhavati, becomes. That means thus, eshaha, this, shlokaha, the verse, the shloka. The wise person, the vidwan, who knows the pran, thus will not have to suffer. His offsprings do not perish. Praja. And he becomes immortal. And there is a following verse. Okay, following verse is from a mantra Upanishad. Mantra part which says the same thing. Okay. It is almost like we talked about the upasana last time. Huh? So this is advice in the Upanishad to give out the fruit of the upasana also. So he is encouraging the seekers to follow the path of the upasana until they develop their powers of mental and intellectual perception. That means in the beginning, the seekers, they need to know what the fruit will be. And this fruit is being told over here, that your offsprings will not perish. It's almost like a modern days advertisement slogan, that you will get the benefit of it if you do this. All the desires which are classified in 3 headings by our scriptures, he says, those desires will be fulfilled. Because ultimately we need to fulfill. Fulfill means no, don't have any desires. And what are those desires? We have a desire for offspring, putreshna. We have a desire for wealth, viteshna. And we have a desire for glory, lokeshna. These are the 3 desires in all of us, until we reach to a level where we don't have these desires. So he says, if you live a life where the thoughts are noble, your actions are noble, your desires will be fulfilled. Because of all these 3 desires, the desire for offsprings, that means the relationship in our social and domestic life, is very important to us. Even the lokeshna we want, so that we look better. The money we want, so that we can help our relationships. So we'll find that relationships in the world to be always intimate and many. So this is a very, we can all understand it. So that's why he mentioned it over here, that use these basic upasanas, you'll have a fruitful life. And he says, even the Mantra Upanishad says the same thing. And the next verse is that Mantra Upanishad clearly declares the same. Let's look at that one. Verse number 12. Utpatim ayatim sthanam vibhutam cha eva panchada adhyatmam cha eva pranasye vigyaye amritam ashnute vigyaye amritam ashnute iti. Utpatim, that means origin, utpati. Ayatihi, incoming. Sathanam, the place. Vibhutim, vibhutvam, all pervasiveness. See, God is called a vibhu, all pervasive. So all pervasiveness is vibhutavam. Cha means and, ev means also. Panchadha, 5-fold. It's like a 5-fold distribution. Adhyatmam, internal expression. Cha ev, moreover. Vigyaye, having known. Amritam, immortality. Ashnute, attains. And it's repeated again. Vigyaye, amritam, ashnute, ite. He who knows the origin, the entry, the seat, the 5-fold distribution of the prana, and the internal state in the body, obtains immortality. Yes, he attains immortality. Okay, so this chapter was about the prana. So distribution of the prana, we saw earlier. Those are 5, according to the functions of the prana, 5 divisions of the prana. Pran, apan, saman, vyan, and udan. That's what he's talking about. Okay. So this is a Vedic mantra quoted here by Rishi Kumar in support of his conclusion contained in this verse. So it's like a very apt conclusion for this chapter, but also justifies the very Brahman Upanishad which we are studying. So the whole chapter deals with a detailed explanation of this mantra. He who knows, remember, knowing is not mere intellectual apprehension. Intellectually, sure, we understand it, but do we really know it? Is it only our mind grasping it? But have we realized it or not? Because ultimately realization has to be there. And realization comes after long and constant meditation. Okay, that's how realization comes. When a person comes to realize the pranic centers in himself or herself and the corresponding realities in the cosmic form, he says, becomes immortal. Immortal. What is immortality? Pran are not immortal. Atma, the soul, the Brahma, is only immortal. You realize that. What part in you is immortal? Okay, you come to experience the perfect identity with the Brahma. In the absolute sense, this experience comes in deep meditation. And that's what immortality is. It's not that your body will not die. Body is made out of these 5 elements. This body has to wither away. But there is something in you which is immortal, and you come to experience that in deep meditations. That's what he means over here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next chapter, chapter number 4. And in this chapter, you will see the question is asked by Gargya and about the sleep and the dream. Sleep and the dream. So far, we have seen the discussion about the waking state in this world. But we know that life is not only the waking. We all have enough quota of experience in the dream state. And even in the deep sleep state also. So in totality, when you look at the life, it includes the experiences of the waking, experiences of the dream, and of course the deep sleep state also. So that's how the students, they are going from the outer to the inner. Very scientific process of thinking. Okay, sure, we want to know the outer also. What is outer? We live in this outer world. But then if you only stay in the outer realm and never peep into the inner, it's not a complete knowledge. So first 3 questions was thorough and complete discussion of the waking state. Because the waking state is that where we want to know where this creation came about. What is happening? In the waking state, we are feeling the prana also. So body and the prana phenomena in the waking state. But here, this student is asking how exactly is the ego center functioning in a person in a deep sleep state. So we'll see that a thorough explanation of a different personalities in ourselves, which is experiencing the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. So this is the chapter 4. So let's look at how this question is being asked. Ath henam so yayani gargya paprach bhagwan etam tasmin purushe kane swapanti kane asmin jagrati katah esha devah swapanan pashyati कस्य एतत् सुखं भव्यति कस्मिन् सर्वे सम्प्रतिष्ठिताः भवन्ति इति. Ath means then. Suryayani, the grandson of Surya, and his name is Gargya. So this young student's name is Gargya. Enam means him. Who is him? Rishi Piplad, the Guru. Prach asked Bhagwan, Lord, etasmin, in this Purushe, a person, Kani, what? Swapnantihi, sleep. Kani, what? Asmin, in him. Jagrati, are awake. Katraha, which? Eshaha, of these. Devaha, the gods, that means the senses. Swapanan, dreams. Pashyati, see. Kasya, whose? Etat, this. Sukham, happiness. Bhavati, becomes. Kasmin, on which? Sarve, all. Sampratishtata, established. Bhavanti, are. Iti means thus. Then Gargya, the grandson of Surya, questioned him, O Bhagwan, what are they that sleep in a person? What again are awake? Which is the Devata who sees the dream? Whose is this happiness, this sukha? On what do all these depend? So it's a pretty exhaustive question. That's why the whole chapter is about answering this question. Okay? And you can see that no positive inquiry is made regarding the waking state here. He says when the physical body is asleep, this student wants to know if there is yet any more energy centers that are still sleeplessly working for the maintenance of this body. Who is taking care of this body? Because we all know when we fall asleep, we are not conscious of this body. But as soon as we emerge out into the waking condition, our body, this vehicle of enjoyment and suffering, is already there. As soon as we get up. So it is observed in a sleeping person that though he is not conscious of his own body, but we know that heart is functioning, digestion continues, body keeps up its warmth also. So that's why he is asking, who is it operating this? Independent of the sleeper. With whose power this body is working? Almost like a sleeplessly guarding the temple of life, which we call a body. So the disciple is asking the teacher as to who are these faithful guardians who continue their functions even when the sleeper has withdrawn his body consciousness. Because we do detach from our body before we sleep, otherwise we won't be able to sleep. We all know that before we enter into sleep, there is a region of experience between waking and sleep called dream. You remember? Jagrata, Swapana, Sushupti. So that's a dream. Whatever be our condition in the waking state world, when we enter into the realm of a dream, we have a totally different set of circumstances in our dream. You can say that a dreamer has a life almost contrary to the life of a waker. So that's why the inquiry is being undertaken over here. The student is asking, even though we are not conscious of ourselves in the deep sleep state, but when we wake up, we all can remember that we enjoyed that part. It's almost like a nameless, perfect bliss we enjoyed. So over here, the inquiry by this student is, to who was the enjoyer of that bliss in us? Because normally we enjoy through the senses. Eyes like to see something beautiful, ears like to hear some beautiful sound, tongue want to taste, but who really enjoyed? Because body was sleeping. So in order to remember a thing, the rememberer and the experiencer of the experience must be one and the same. And since we remember that we had enjoyed a bliss in our deep sleep, we ourselves must have been in deep sleep enjoying that bliss experience. So that's why this question, very subtle question, highly subtle question, I would say, completely justified. That one who is experimenting with life as such cannot avoid this inquiry. Who is the sleep happiness? Where did it come at? And who is enjoying it? And the disciple wants to know also the substratum for these three different ego centers, which are functioning in all of them and all of us. It's almost like we have a gold jewelry, piece of gold jewelry. What is the substratum for different types of gold jewelry? If they're made out of gold, we say substratum is gold. Over here, the student is asking, what is the substratum? To the dreamer, the waking state world is non-existent. And to the waker, the dream world is a mere delusion. And to the deep sleeper, both waking and the dream worlds are non-existent. So to the dreamer, the waking state world is non-existent. Okay, we know that. Once we wake up, dream, we know it was just a dream. So to the dreamer, the waking state world is non-existent the same way. And to the waker, the dream world is a mere delusion to be ignored. And to the deep sleeper, both waking and the dreams worlds are non-existent. So these are like a three separate levels of consciousness. But all at the same, there is some common factor in me which is experiencing it, which is experiencing all three. And it's not identifying with any one of these. And unless we accept that there is a fundamental common denominator for all these different sets of experiences. We cannot explain how we can remember yesterday's waking state and last night's dream and the joy of the deep sleep we had in the early hours of this morning. So in order to remember these things, we must consult with that factor in us who has experienced all these three. But still, it was neither the waker nor the dreamer or the sleeper. So this disciple is demanding here the explanation for this great all-witnessing factor, which is ever untouched by the experiences, and without which no experience can happen. This is called a conscious factor, the divine spark, the life center. And that is the theme that is indicated by this question. On what do all these depend? What is that substratum? Let's go back to the translation of direct translation of this. See if everybody can understand all this. Then Gargya, the grandson of Surya, questioned him, "O Bhagwan, what are they that sleep in a person? What again are awake? Which is the Devta who sees the dream? Who is this happiness, Sukha? On what do all these depend?" Let's look at verse number 2 in this chapter. Tasmai sa hovacha yatha garge maricheho kasyastam gachta sarva etasmin tejo mandale eki bhavanti ta puna punar udyata prachar antyev have tat sarvam pare deve manasye hi bhavati ten tah एषः पुरुषः न शृणोति न पश्यति न जिघ्नति न रस्यते न सपुष्यति न वदते न अदते न अनन्द्यते न विसृजते न आयते स्वपितिः चक्षते. Pretty long words, but if you look at this, words are very small and simple also. Okay, let's go through one word at a time. Tasme, to him. That means to Gargya, the student. Sa means he, Rishi Piplad, the Guru. Uvach said. Yatha means as, Gargya, that's the name. Maricheha, rays. Akarsyehe, of the sun. Astam gachataha, the setting. See, like a sun set, that's what it means. Sarva means all. Etasmin, in this. Tejoho mandale, circle of light, like a solar orb. Eki bhavanti, becomes united. Ta means those. Punha means again. Udyata. Punar udyata. Rising again. Pracharantihi. Go out. That means radiate. Evam means so. Ha means verily. Tat sarvam. Tat means that. Sarvam means all. That means all senses. pare, higher, devehe, in God, manasi, in mind, eki bhavati, becomes united. Ten means thus, tahri, then, eshaha, this, purushaha, a human being. Na shrunoti, hears not. Na pashyati, sees not. Na jivrati, smells not. Na rasyate, tastes not. Na saprishyate, feels not. Na abhivadate, speaks not. Na adate, takes not. Na anandyate, enjoys not. Na visrijate, evacuates not. Na iyayate, moves not. Swapiti, sleeps. Achakshate, says. He replied, O Gargya, just as the rays of the sun, when he sets, becomes one in that disk of light, and they come forth again when the sun next rises. So also all these become one in the highest Dev, the mind. Therefore, at that time, man or a person no more hears, sees, smells, tastes, or feels. Nor does he speak, nor take, nor enjoys, nor evacuate, nor move. And they say, he sleeps. So first of the inquiries of the disciple was, what are the factors in that sleeping man? So very direct answer is given by the Rishi over here. He is enumerating the factors and faculties that retire into the dormant condition during sleep. So it's like a greatest and the exhaustive definition of sleep over here. Defining the sleep for us by the positive assertion of its qualities as by the negative explanations of the conditions that are not in sleep. In waking, they are there, in sleep, they are not. The experience of sleep cannot be defined in terms of the mental and the intellectual life. We have all experienced it. Because the waking state, as we all know, the period of our experience, we used our instruments of our cognition. We are aware of the sense objects of the world. And sleep is not a waking state. So the waking state is not in the sleep. So waking state is the time when the sense organs are fully active. And sleep is the time when they have gone back. All the indriyas, all the senses, they retire into their very source. And what is the source over here? The mind. We have found earlier that the agent behind all the sense organs is the mind. Without mental contact, the sense organs cannot function. We know that. In the Vedic literature, we find a description which says that the mind itself, expressed in terms of our physical structure, is the sense organs. And that is the one which is extending to the universe into the 5 great elements. So it's almost like a mind is the apex of a cone, the base of which is the entire cosmic existence mentioned. When there is a manipulation of the gross and the subtle, gross is the manifested and subtle is the unmanifested. Mind is the one which is working. So in the deep sleep state, the entire world of polarity, cognized by us through the 5 great windows in our structure, become one in the highest there, mind. Highest there. So the powers of the perception in the sense organs get withdrawn from their respective centers. That's why he says in sleep, you don't see, you don't move, you don't evacuate, you cannot thought. Because it all get deposited as it were in the very mind. So he is using a metaphor from the setting sun. He says that just as the rays of the sun are gathered, it seems like they are gathered and they go back into the sun, into that burning disk of the setting sun, temporarily for the night. And it emerges out in the morning. It's like all those rays are shooting out and then they go back. So the same way our rays, they just go back when we go to sleep. These 5 great beams of light that are emerging out through the 5 peepholes of the sense organs are withdrawn to the source of all perceptions temporarily. And they emerge out as soon as the individual returns to the waking state. That's how he's explaining it. This is sleep. So in short, the sleeping is the condition when the human mind has set for the time being. Just like a sun is setting, mind is setting. When it emerges out, the individual is pushed into the plane of waking state experience. So here he has enumerated the list of the activities. Okay. All the functions of the instruments, action instruments, karamendriya, and all the perceptions of the instruments, the jnanendriya. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. Feeling belong to the perception group of the instruments of knowledge. And to speak, to take, to enjoy, to evacuate, and to move are the functions of the karamendriya. Okay. When both of them are inactive, the individual is considered sleep. Okay. So we can stop it here because he's going to go very much deep into this is sleep also and a deep sleep also with the help of some other analogies also. So, and I'm sure you have some questions, so let's start with this verse number 2 today. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.